Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It all started with a man named Reynolds, a successful but emotionally distant CEO. He had everything anyone could dream of: money, power, and status. But despite his wealth, he felt like something was missing. His heart had grown cold, his relationships shallow, and he had little faith in the people around him. Work was the only thing that kept him going, and even that was starting to lose its meaning. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found himself walking through the sterile halls of a private hospital, heading to a meeting with his company's board members. His mind was still consumed by the latest merger. But something in the air felt different today, something unsettling. It was as if life itself had hit pause, and in that moment, he questioned whether all this, the business deals, the money, really mattered. What was the point if he felt so disconnected from everything? He paused at the door to the conference room. Before he could enter, a nurse passed by, her eyes briefly meeting his. She was carrying a clipboard, her expression focused but kind. Ethan barely noticed her at first, too distracted by his own thoughts. But there was something about her that caught his attention. Her name was Olivia Carter, and she had been assigned to his case earlier that morning. She wasn't just any nurse. She was known for her extraordinary patience, and even more so, her ability to connect with people who were lost or hurting. And in that moment, Ethan felt like he had been both of those things for a very long time. As the day went on, Ethan couldn't shake the encounter. The next morning, when he woke up in his hotel suite, he found his thoughts drifting back to Olivia. He had seen many people in his life, but never someone who seemed so real, so unaffected by the world around her. Olivia was kind and focused, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that made Ethan wonder what it would be like to be in her presence for a longer period. He found himself feeling uneasy, something he wasn't used to. Ethan was used to control, to power. He wasn't one to second-guess his own actions. But Olivia had stirred something in him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He knew it wasn't love, not yet at least, but it was something different, something that made him question what he had been doing with his life. As days passed, Ethan found himself needing her presence more and more. His health was deteriorating from the stress, and he was ordered to take a few days off to recover. But it wasn't just physical rest that he needed, it was emotional healing. Ethan made an appointment to meet with Olivia for a routine checkup, not because he was physically ill, but because he was searching for something, a connection he had long ignored. When Olivia arrived at his hotel room for the scheduled visit, she was as professional as ever, but there was a warmth in her smile that immediately put Ethan at ease. She spoke with calm confidence, never pushing him to talk about his feelings, but gently encouraging him to open up. For the first time in years, Ethan found himself talking, really talking, about his loneliness, his regrets, and his growing disillusionment with the life he had created. Olivia listened, not as a nurse, but as a person who truly cared. It wasn't long before Ethan realized that what he thought was missing from his life wasn't a business deal or a new acquisition, but something as simple as genuine human connection. In a world where he had spent so long trying to control everything, Olivia had shown him that sometimes letting go was the only way to breathe again. As the days went by, Ethan started to change. The business calls weren't as important anymore. The pressures of his empire, though still present, no longer consumed him. And it was all because of Olivia, the woman who had opened his eyes to what he had been missing. Their professional relationships started to blur as they spent more time together. And in the quiet moments they shared, Ethan realized that he wanted more than just her kindness. He wanted to be part of her world. Now, Ethan stood at a crossroads, unsure of how to move forward. He knew he could go back to his old life, continue building his empire, playing the part of the heartless CEO. But that life no longer felt like his. He wanted to make a real connection with Olivia, one that wasn't about contracts, business, or even wealth. It was about something deeper, something real. But he had a choice to make. Could he step away from the life he had built and take a chance on love, on something real? Or would he continue living in the shadow of his former self, forever trapped in a cycle of loneliness? Stay tuned for the next part of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will Ethan find the courage to make the leap? And will Olivia's kindness be the key to unlocking the future they both deserve? As the days passed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Olivia. Her smile, the way she listened to him as if she truly cared, was something he had never experienced before. He had spent his entire life around people who either wanted something from him or were only interested in his money and influence. But Olivia, she was different. Her kindness wasn't driven by anything other than a genuine desire to help him heal, to see him as more than just a CEO. It was a strange feeling, something he couldn't quite define, but it felt like warmth, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Every morning, he found himself looking forward to their sessions. Olivia had this calming effect on him, and as they spent more time together, his perspective on life began to shift. Slowly but surely, Ethan was starting to feel alive again. His once cold, rigid outlook was melting away, replaced by a newfound openness. For the first time in years, he wasn't just going through the motions. He was starting to really live, to breathe again. One afternoon, as Olivia entered his suite for another session, she noticed a change in him. The usual weight on his shoulders seemed lighter. Ethan, usually distant, now met her gaze with something softer in his eyes. "You seem different," Olivia remarked, setting down her clipboard. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I feel different," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "It's like I'm waking up from a long sleep. You've helped me more than you know, Olivia." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. Olivia had heard countless patients thank her, but this was different. Ethan wasn't just thanking her for his physical recovery. He was acknowledging a deeper change, one that had started in his soul. For a moment, the room felt heavy with unspoken words. Olivia knew Ethan was still struggling, still grappling with the conflict between his old life and the new life he was trying to build. But he was trying, and that was a start. "It's not just me," Olivia replied softly. "You're doing the hard work. You're choosing to change, to embrace a new way of living. It's not easy, but you're doing it." Ethan looked at her, his gaze lingering a little longer than it usually did. There was a tension in the air, a quiet understanding between them. In that moment, something shifted. Ethan realized that what he had thought was missing from his life wasn't just the work he had left behind. It was the connection he had been craving all along. And here, in front of him, was someone who was showing him what real connection looked like. After that conversation, Ethan found himself reflecting more deeply. He still hadn't fully made peace with the man he had been, the CEO who prioritized his company over everything else. But with Olivia, he felt like he could let his guard down. He didn't have to be the man everyone expected him to be. He could just be himself. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's recovery progressed. He began taking more time for himself, for things that brought him joy outside of work. He rediscovered hobbies he had long neglected, and he even started volunteering at a local charity, something he would have scoffed at not too long ago. Olivia noticed the changes, and though she remained professional, there was a quiet pride in her heart. She had helped guide Ethan through his darkest days, but now, she was watching him come into his own. She couldn't help but admire his strength. One evening, after a long day, Ethan invited Olivia to dinner. They sat in a small, cozy restaurant, far from the lavish places Ethan was used to. The conversation was light, but there was an underlying connection between them that neither of them could ignore. They talked about everything and nothing, and for once, Ethan didn't feel the weight of his title or his company on his shoulders. As the night wore on, Ethan grew quieter, and Olivia could tell something was on his mind. She waited patiently, giving him the space he needed. Finally, after a long pause, Ethan spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice steady. "About everything. About the life I've lived and the person I want to be." He paused again, as if weighing his words. "Olivia, I don't know what I would have done without you." Olivia felt a flutter in her chest. She hadn't expected him to say that, but she knew it was the truth. He had come a long way, and it was because of his own choices, not just her guidance. She smiled softly. "You did it yourself, Ethan. I just showed you the way." Ethan looked at her, his expression serious now. He reached across the table, taking her hand gently. For the first time, Olivia realized how much Ethan had changed. The man before her wasn't the distant CEO who had walked into her office weeks ago. This was a man who had opened up, who was willing to be vulnerable and real. "I'm not the same person I was when we first met," Ethan said, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "And it's because of you. I'm starting to understand that life isn't just about business deals or numbers. It's about people. It's about real connections." Olivia squeezed his hand, her heart beating a little faster. She had always known that Ethan had it in him to change, but hearing him say it out loud was something else entirely. The evening ended on a quiet note, but as they walked outside, Ethan knew one thing for certain. His journey was far from over, but he wasn't walking it alone anymore. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will Ethan continue to break down the walls he built around himself? And will Olivia's belief in him lead to something more than just healing? It had been a few weeks since that dinner, and Ethan and Olivia had grown even closer. Though their relationship remained professional, it was impossible to ignore the undeniable bond that had formed between them. Ethan was no longer the cold, isolated CEO who had walked into Olivia's life months ago. He was someone who had rediscovered the simple joys of living, someone who was learning how to connect, not just with his work, but with the people around him. Olivia had been there every step of the way, helping him heal in ways he never thought possible. One evening, Ethan found himself standing outside Olivia's apartment building, his mind racing with thoughts of her. The truth was, he had been fighting the feelings that had slowly but surely crept up on him. He admired her strength, her kindness, the way she had made him feel like he mattered again. The last few months had shown him just how much he had been missing, not just in his career, but in his heart. He had spent so many years putting up walls, afraid to let anyone in, but Olivia had effortlessly broken through every one of them. He had come to a decision. He needed to speak to her, to finally be honest about how he was feeling. It wasn't just gratitude for the help she had given him. It was something deeper, something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not just in his life, but in theirs. As he stood there, hesitating for a moment, the door to Olivia's building opened, and there she was, walking toward him with her usual warm smile. Her presence always made him feel a sense of calm he could never quite explain. It was as if the world around him faded away when she was near. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Olivia asked, her voice full of curiosity, but also a hint of concern. Ethan smiled, taking a deep breath before he spoke. "I needed to see you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how much you've changed my life. How much you've helped me rediscover what it means to really live, to really feel." He paused, his heart racing a little as he tried to find the right words. Olivia's expression softened as she took a step closer to him. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but she wasn't sure what he was trying to say. Her heart skipped a beat as she listened intently. "You've helped me more than I can put into words," Ethan continued. "You showed me that life isn't just about success, about building empires or chasing after things that don't matter. It's about the people who care for you, about the moments that make you feel alive." And Olivia, in these past few weeks, I've come to realize that I want more than just a life of business and achievements. I want something real. I want us to be real. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Olivia wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. She had always known Ethan was struggling, but this was something she didn't expect. She wasn't sure what to say, so she simply stood there, processing his words. "I know I've probably said too much," Ethan said, his voice lowering slightly. "But I needed to tell you how I feel. Because if I don't, I'll regret it." Olivia's heart raced as she searched his face, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had always believed in Ethan's potential for change, but hearing him speak so openly about his feelings left her speechless. She had spent so much time helping him heal that she hadn't allowed herself to think about the possibility of a deeper connection between them. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I care about you too, but we've both been through so much. I don't want to complicate things, not when you're still finding your way." Her words were kind, but there was a trace of hesitation. Olivia had grown attached to him, but she was afraid of what might happen if they crossed that line. Was she just helping him heal, or was there something more between them? Ethan took a step closer, closing the distance between them. He could feel the uncertainty in her, but he was determined. He had already let go of the walls he had built around his heart, and he wasn't going to retreat now. "Olivia," he said softly, "I don't want to complicate anything either. but I know that I can't go back to the way things were before. I can't keep living in the past, pretending I'm fine when I'm not. You've shown me what it means to really live. And if I'm being honest, I want to explore what this could be, what we could be, together. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this, but there was something in Ethan's voice that made her heart flutter. She had always believed in the possibility of love, but had she ever really thought about the potential between them? Ethan, she began, but the words faltered. It wasn't that she didn't want to be with him. It was just that this was all so new, so unexpected. They had both been through so much, and she didn't want to rush into anything. You don't have to answer me right now, Ethan said quickly, sensing her hesitation. I just needed you to know how I feel. I've already changed so much because of you, Olivia. I think I'm ready to take the next step. Olivia smiled softly, her heart full. She had never expected to be in this position, but somehow, it felt right. Maybe this wasn't just about helping Ethan heal. Maybe it was about them both healing together. We'll figure it out, Olivia said, her voice gentle yet confident. One step at a time. As they stood there, looking at each other in the quiet of the night, both knew this was only the beginning of a new journey. A journey that was as uncertain as it was full of possibility. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will their connection grow into something more, or will the fears of the past hold them back? The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but also a quiet sense of anticipation. Ethan and Olivia were taking things slow, but something had shifted between them. They both knew they were on the verge of something new, something neither of them had expected. Ethan found himself thinking about her constantly, not just as his nurse, but as someone who had become important in ways he couldn't fully explain. Olivia, on the other hand, was beginning to question the boundaries she had set for herself. She had always kept her professional life separate from her personal feelings, but with Ethan, it felt different. The connection they shared was undeniable. It was on a rainy Saturday afternoon that things truly started to change. Ethan had invited Olivia to meet him at his office. It wasn't for a checkup or a therapy session. It was a personal invitation. He had spent the morning reflecting on everything he had been through, and he realized he had been avoiding something important. He hadn't truly shared who he was with her. Not just as the CEO of a billion-dollar company, but as the man who was still learning to live again. He wanted her to see him for who he really was, without the walls or the titles. When Olivia arrived at his office, she found it surprisingly unassuming. The sleek, polished surface of his desk contrasted sharply with the man she had come to know, a man who was trying to redefine himself. Ethan stood by the window, looking out over the city. When he heard her enter, he turned, his expression unreadable. "Olivia, thank you for coming," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of vulnerability. She smiled softly. "Of course, Ethan. You seemed like you wanted to talk." Ethan nodded, walking toward her. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke, the words coming out slowly as if he had been rehearsing them in his mind. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something I haven't shared with anyone in a long time. I've spent years hiding behind my title, my achievements. I've built this empire, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became so focused on success that I forgot how to be human." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I didn't just need physical healing, Olivia. I needed someone to show me how to live again. How to care, how to feel. And you've done that." Olivia felt her heart flutter as she listened. This was the real Ethan, not the CEO, not the businessman, but the man who had struggled, just like everyone else. The vulnerability in his words was something she hadn't expected, and it made her see him in a new light. "Ethan," Olivia said softly, stepping closer to him, "you've already made incredible changes. It's not just about what you've accomplished in business. You're finding your way back to the person you were meant to be, and you don't have to do it alone." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on her. The air between them seemed to hum with a quiet intensity, something neither of them had dared to acknowledge before. "I know," he replied. "And that's why I wanted to talk to you today. Because I'm not ready to let go of what we've started. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I don't want to pretend anymore. Olivia, I want to be with you. Not just because you helped me heal, but because I think I'm falling for you." The words hung in the air for a long moment, and Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had known this was coming, had felt the shift in their relationship, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so real. She had been careful, had kept her distance, unsure of where this was going. But now, with Ethan standing before her, the uncertainty faded. She knew, deep down, that this was more than just a fleeting connection. Olivia smiled, her eyes softening. I think I've been falling for you too, Ethan. His face lit up with a mixture of relief and happiness. He took a step closer to her, and this time, there was no hesitation. He reached for her hand, gently intertwining their fingers. I'm ready for whatever comes next, he said, his voice full of promise. I'm ready to build something real. Together. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt a sense of peace. They weren't perfect. Neither of them had all the answers. But they had something more important, each other. And in that moment, that was enough. As they stood there, hands clasped together, the future seemed wide open. They didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but they knew they were ready to face them together. And that was a start. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will they continue to build a life together, or will the pressures of their past come back to challenge them? Only time will tell. In the days that followed, Ethan and Olivia began navigating their new relationship with a sense of cautious optimism. Both were aware of the complexities that came with blending personal and professional lives, especially in Ethan's world, where everything seemed to move at lightning speed. But despite the challenges they might face, there was a shared understanding between them, a connection that neither could deny. Ethan, once consumed by his empire, now found himself eager to spend more time with Olivia to learn about the things that made her smile, the things she cared about beyond her role as a nurse. One evening, after a long week of meetings and corporate decisions, Ethan invited Olivia to a small park near his apartment. It was a quiet place, away from the hustle and bustle of the city, where they could talk freely without distractions. As they sat on a bench under the soft glow of the streetlights, Ethan felt the weight of the world slip away, replaced by the peace Olivia's presence always seemed to bring. I've been thinking a lot, Ethan said, his voice thoughtful. I've spent so much of my life trying to build something that would prove my worth, but I never stopped to ask myself what really matters. You've helped me see that. Olivia turned to him, her heart warm at his words. She had always known Ethan was capable of change, but hearing him acknowledge it out loud was something special. It made her realize how far he had come, how much he had grown in such a short time. It's not easy, she replied, her voice gentle. But you're doing it. You're changing because you wanna, not because you have to. That's the hardest part. For a moment, they sat in silence, the sound of the city around them providing a comforting backdrop to their conversation. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months lift off his shoulders. He had come a long way, but there was still more to figure out. I know I'm not there yet, Ethan said, looking at her with a mix of gratitude and determination. But I'm getting there. I want you to know that I'm in this, for real this time. Not just because of the changes I've made, but because of you. Olivia's heart fluttered at his words, but she couldn't help but feel a twinge of uncertainty. They had come so far, but what would happen if the world they were building together was tested? Would they be strong enough to handle it? She wasn't sure, but for the first time, she believed that together, they could face anything. You've already come so far, Ethan, she said softly. And we'll take it one day at a time, together. They both knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. Ethan's world was demanding, and Olivia's work was no less intense. But for the first time in his life, Ethan was ready to make time for what mattered most, for the woman sitting next to him and the life they were beginning to build. The next few weeks brought their own set of trials. Ethan had to navigate a complicated business deal, and Olivia found herself dealing with a particularly difficult case at the hospital. But they leaned on each other in ways they never had before. Ethan was no longer the isolated figure he once was, and Olivia had learned to let go of the professional distance she had kept so carefully. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan called Olivia to check in. They hadn't seen each other much in the past few days, but their bond was strong enough to withstand the physical distance. As they talked on the phone, there was an unmistakable warmth in Ethan's voice. I miss you, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Olivia smiled, her heart racing a little at the vulnerability in his tone. I miss you too, but we'll see each other soon. I know, Ethan replied, his voice soft. I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me. The conversation ended with a promise to see each other the following day, but for both of them, it was a reminder of how far they had come and how much they still had to look forward to. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and Olivia's relationship grew stronger. There were still moments of doubt, of uncertainty, but those moments were fewer and farther between. They found a rhythm together, balancing their careers and their personal lives in ways they never thought possible. It wasn't perfect, and they both knew there were more challenges ahead, but for the first time, neither of them felt like they were facing them alone. Ethan had learned that success was not just about achieving more, but about finding the right people to share your journey with. And Olivia had learned that love wasn't just something that happened. It was something that grew, something that took time and effort, but was worth every moment. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will their love continue to flourish, or will the pressures of the world around them pull them apart? Only time will tell. Months passed, and life seemed to settle into a rhythm for Ethan and Olivia. They had their challenges, of course, the pressures of work, the constant demands of Ethan's business, and the ever-present uncertainty about what the future held. But with each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and their ability to navigate the complexities of their lives together became more natural. Ethan had come to rely on Olivia in ways he had never thought possible, and Olivia had learned to trust in their connection, allowing herself to open up in ways she hadn't before. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan found himself staring out the window of his penthouse. The city lights twinkled below, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about everything he had been through, the isolation, the success, the hollow victories. He had spent so much time running from emotions, from relationships, and from love. But now, with Olivia, it felt like he was finally understanding what it meant to truly live. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen before he dialed her number. He needed to hear her voice, to feel that sense of calm that always came when they spoke. "Hey, it's me," Ethan said when she answered, his voice sounding more vulnerable than he intended. "How was your day?" Olivia smiled as she listened to him. She could always tell when something was on his mind, even when he tried to hide it. "It was good, just busy. How about you?" she asked, sensing the hesitation in his tone. "Busy? Yeah," Ethan replied, sighing deeply. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. About where I am, where I'm going. And about you." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this conversation, for Ethan to finally be honest about how he was feeling. But as always, she held back, not wanting to rush him. "You've been on my mind, too," Olivia said softly, her voice warm with sincerity. "We've come a long way, Ethan. I know it's not perfect, but I believe in what we're building." Ethan paused, turning away from the window and sitting down on the couch. He ran his hand through his hair, thinking carefully about what he wanted to say. "I think I've been afraid," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "Afraid of letting go of control, of letting myself feel things. But when I'm with you, I realize that I don't need to be afraid. You've made me realize that I can have both, success and love, business and life. And I don't want to let go of this, Olivia. Not now, not ever." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Olivia could feel her heart swelling at his words. She had always known Ethan was capable of change, but hearing him speak so openly was something new. It was as if he was finally free of the walls he had built around himself. "I don't want to let go either," Olivia said softly, her voice full of warmth. "You've changed, Ethan. I've seen it. And I believe in us. But we don't need to have all the answers right now. We can take it one step at a time, together." Ethan smiled to himself, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. For so long, he had been living in the shadows of his own expectations, afraid to let anyone in. But with Olivia, everything felt different. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a man who had learned to love, to connect, and to live fully. "You're right," he said, his voice soft but full of certainty. "One step at a time. And I want you by my side every step of the way." As they continued to talk, both Ethan and Olivia realized that this wasn't just about the challenges they had faced, or even the growth they had experienced. It was about the connection they had built, the trust they had earned, and the love that was growing between them every day. Days later, Ethan invited Olivia to a special event, a charity gala he had been organizing for months. It was a big deal for him, and he had worked tirelessly to make it a success. But as the night approached, he found himself feeling more nervous than he had expected. This was the first time he was inviting Olivia into this part of his world, the world of high-powered business deals and formal events. As they entered the grand ballroom, Ethan felt a pang of unease. The room was filled with people he had known for years, all dressed in designer suits and extravagant gowns. But as he looked at Olivia, standing beside him in a simple yet elegant dress, he realized something. None of this mattered. What mattered was that she was here with him, and that was enough. Olivia could sense the tension in Ethan as they mingled with the guests. She reached out and took his hand, offering him a reassuring smile. "You don't have to impress anyone, Ethan," she whispered. "You've already proven who you are to me." He looked at her, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're right. I've spent so long trying to be someone I thought I had to be. But now, with you by my side, I realize that who I am is enough." The night went on, and Ethan found himself more at ease than he had ever been at one of these events. The people around him could see the change in him, the way he was more relaxed, more authentic. And as he danced with Olivia later in the evening, under the soft glow of the chandeliers, he knew that this was just the beginning. No matter what came next, they were ready to face it together. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will they continue to find their way forward, or will the pressures of their worlds pull them apart? Only time will tell. The days following the gala brought both peace and uncertainty for Ethan and Olivia. Though they had shared a magical evening together, both knew that their relationship was about to face new challenges. Ethan had always been a man who thrived on control, and now, as he tried to balance his growing feelings for Olivia with his high-pressure job, he felt a familiar sense of unease creeping back in. Olivia, on the other hand, was learning to trust in the love that had blossomed between them, but she too was uncertain about how their worlds would collide. She had always kept her distance from the high-society life Ethan led, and now, as their connection deepened, she wondered how much of her own heart she could offer without losing herself. One afternoon, as Ethan stood at his office window, looking out over the city, he realized how much he had changed. He had spent so many years focused solely on his work, climbing the corporate ladder, and building a legacy. But now, with Olivia in his life, he was beginning to question everything he had once believed. What was success if it meant sacrificing happiness? What was the point of wealth if you had no one to share it with? These thoughts consumed him as he picked up his phone and dialed Olivia. "Hey, it's me," Ethan said when she answered. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of something in his tone that made Olivia sit up straighter. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, sensing his hesitation. "I don't know, I've been thinking a lot," Ethan replied, his voice softer now. "About us. About everything." He paused, unsure of how to continue. "I feel like I've been running from something, and I don't want it anymore. I've made so many mistakes in the past, Olivia, and I don't want to make more. I don't want to lose you." Olivia's heart tightened at his words. She had always known that Ethan's walls would be hard to break down, but she hadn't realized just how much he was struggling with his own insecurities. "Ethan, listen to me," she said gently. "You haven't lost me. You've done so much for me already, and I'm not going anywhere." Ethan let out a sigh of relief, the tension he had been holding on to starting to ease. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that I'll mess this up. I've spent my whole life building this empire, but it's not worth anything if I don't have you to share it with. I don't know what to do with myself when I'm not working. I don't know how to be just me." Olivia paused for a moment, thinking carefully before she spoke. "Ethan, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to be just anything. You're enough as you are. And as for us, we'll figure it out. We always do." Her words were a balm for Ethan's restless soul. He realized that he had been so focused on trying to control every aspect of his life that he had forgotten the simple truth. Life was meant to be lived, not just managed. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present. "I don't want to lose you, Olivia. You've shown me that I can be more than just the CEO. I can be a person again. I just need you by my side." Olivia smiled softly, her heart full as she imagined the man Ethan had become. It wasn't just about the big gestures or the lavish events. It was the quiet moments, the honesty, the vulnerability they shared. She knew they still had a long way to go, but they were heading in the right direction. "I'm here, Ethan, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt at peace. He had spent years trying to build a life based on achievements. But now, he realized that the most important thing in his life was the woman who had stood by him through it all. The following weeks were a time of growth for both Ethan and Olivia. They learned to navigate their relationship with a sense of balance, embracing the ups and downs as they came. Ethan's business continued to thrive, but he no longer allowed it to consume him. Olivia, too, found her own way of balancing her career with her personal life, no longer afraid to let herself be vulnerable. And as they stood together one evening, looking out over the city they had come to love, Ethan knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges, of course, but they had each other, and that, he realized, was all he truly needed. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will their love continue to grow, or will the pressures of their pasts come back to haunt them? Only time will tell. As the months went on, Ethan and Olivia continued to grow closer, their bond stronger with each passing day. Ethan had found a balance between his work and his personal life, and Olivia had learned to trust the depth of their connection. They spent weekends together, enjoying quiet moments away from the pressures of their respective careers. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was truly living, not just existing to work and achieve. He had found a sense of peace in Olivia, something he never thought was possible before. And Olivia, once hesitant to open her heart again, had found someone who valued her not just for what she could do, but for who she was. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Ethan's penthouse, the city, lights stretching out before them, Ethan turned to Olivia, his gaze softening. "I never thought I'd be here," he said, his voice low but steady. "I used to think that everything I needed was just more success, more power, more achievements. But all those things didn't matter without you." Olivia looked at him, her heart swelling. She had seen the change in him over the months, and though the journey hadn't always been easy, it had been worth every moment. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You've come so far, Ethan," she said softly. "I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of us. We've built something real together." Ethan smiled, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "I'm not the same man I was when we first met. You've helped me see that. You've helped me become the person I've always wanted to be, even if I didn't know it until now." As the night wore on, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of everything that had changed settling around them. But beneath it all, there was an unspoken understanding between them, that they had found something rare, something worth holding on to. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it was real. The next morning, Ethan woke up early, his mind already racing with thoughts of the future. He had come so far in his journey, and now, he was ready for the next step. He knew he wanted more than just the life he had built for himself. He wanted a life with Olivia. He had spent so long avoiding commitment, but now, the thought of spending the rest of his life without her by his side felt impossible. Later that day, as they walked through a park together, Ethan stopped in front of a fountain. He turned to Olivia, his heart pounding in his chest. "Olivia," he began, his voice shaking slightly with the weight of what he was about to say. "I've spent so much of my life running from what matters most. But being with you has shown me what it truly means to live. And I don't want to waste another second without you in my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you. Will you marry me?" Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, her heart beating faster. She had known this moment would come, but hearing him say it out loud filled her with emotions she couldn't quite put into words. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Ethan, the man who had shown her that love wasn't just about grand gestures, but about the quiet, meaningful moments they shared. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, the world seemed to fade away. In that moment, it was just the two of them, standing together in a park that had witnessed the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it together. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Ethan and Olivia's story. Will their love continue to flourish in the face of life's challenges? Only time will tell. As the months passed, Ethan and Olivia's lives continued to evolve, but one thing remained constant: their love for each other. Their engagement had brought them even closer, and they spent their days preparing for a future that was both exciting and uncertain. Ethan had made peace with the fact that his life would never be the same. He had come to realize that the success he had once chased relentlessly was nothing compared to the joy of waking up beside Olivia every day. Their shared moments of quiet laughter, late-night talks, and the simple act of supporting one another through life's ups and downs made everything else feel insignificant. Planning their wedding was something both of them approached with joy, but also with a sense of calm that neither of them had expected. They were no longer concerned with perfection or impressing others. It wasn't about the extravagant venue or the size of the guest list. It was about the promise they were making to each other, the life they would build together. Their wedding was small, intimate, with just their closest friends and family. And as Olivia walked down the aisle, Ethan couldn't help but feel his heart swell with emotion. She looked more beautiful than he had ever imagined. And in that moment, he knew without a doubt that this was the beginning of their forever. The ceremony was simple but perfect, each word spoken carrying the weight of their journey together. Ethan vowed to love and cherish Olivia, not just in the moments of ease, but through every challenge that life would throw their way. Olivia, with a smile that reached her eyes, promised to stand by him, to help him grow and become the best version of himself. Together, the vows they exchanged were not just words. They were a reflection of everything they had been through and everything they were about to become. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, the world seemed to disappear around them. Ethan held Olivia close, feeling the steady beat of their hearts in sync. In that moment, everything was right. There were no fears, no insecurities, only the certainty that they were meant to be together. Their love was not the whirlwind romance that many dream of, but it was real. It was built on trust, on the quiet moments of vulnerability, and on the willingness to grow and change together. It wasn't always easy, but nothing worth having ever is. They had both made mistakes, but they had learned from them, and in doing so, they had found something even more precious than success. They had found each other. As the reception continued, filled with laughter and dancing, Ethan looked at Olivia and smiled. It wasn't the lavishness of the day that made it special, but the love they shared and the life they would build moving forward. He had everything he needed right here, and for the first time in his life, he felt at peace. "I love you," he whispered to Olivia as they stood together, watching their friends and family celebrate their love. Olivia smiled, her heart full. "I love you too. Always." And so, they walked into the future hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. They knew there would be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when things weren't easy. But they also knew that together, they could face anything. Their love, built on a foundation of trust, vulnerability, and shared dreams, was strong enough to withstand whatever life threw their way. Stay tuned for future chapters of Ethan and Olivia's story. Their journey of love and growth is far from over, but one thing is certain: their hearts will always belong to each other.